Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the Way of Wade Shadow 5. These have some really unique components to them. Things I think you might want to customize or kind of, choose your own adventure with on these. But a super unique looking shoe, and also borrows some things from previous models of other shoe lines as well. Let's get into them. And thanks to Way of Wade for sending me a pair to check out. However, this video is by no means sponsored. I'm under no obligation to make a video, and of course, all opinions are always still my own. Now, starting off in the uppers, this is a real smorgasbord of materials. In the forefoot, you have a really tight, dense weaving on there. It's almost matted down. And then throughout the rest of the top layer of the uppers, it's basically reinforced with molding around it to give a little bit more containment, just a little bit more structure to it. Now, underneath of that is a booty liner where the tongue is connected to the heel counter, and you get this really dense internal padded heel counter. Now, it is a very thin tongue. However, because of the way the laces lie on these, there really is no discomfort from the lace line whatsoever. I did find on these the laces were very elastic, so if you like something a little bit more of a stout lockdown, you might just want to switch out the laces on these. Interesting thing is the tongue being so breathable. If you look at the breathability test on these, you would think that they wouldn't even heat up 100 degrees, right? However, on that breathability test, heated up 144.9 degrees. And that's pretty significant. However, the biggest driver of that is actually the insole of them. This is a boom foam insole, and it is very thick. I noticed when I did the heat gun test, I took this thing out afterwards, it was just white hot. Once I took it out and did that test again a few hours later, it only heated up 122.3 degrees, which is still, above 100 degrees, but that is more in kind of like the normal range of a shoe, especially a shoe meant for outdoor basketball. And same thing, if you look at the breathability mapping of these, the fog is just blowing out of the tongue like crazy on these. So in terms of airflow, there is quite a bit of it. It's just that boom foam insole does hold on to some heat. It also holds on to some other things, which we will talk about in the midsole teardown section. Now, if you look at this on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, that molding that goes all the way around the shoe does do pretty well against the burr. The burr does just start to barely get through it, but it does not actually touch the textile underneath of it. So I'd say dragging and sliding it's going to be okay on an outdoor court. You'll probably start to wear down the foam a little bit before you wear down the uppers. But because this molding is pretty slick, I think its coefficient of friction is going to be pretty low. So I think it'll still do okay. It might look a little bit weird after a while, but I think in terms of protection, I think it's still going to be fine. And I wasn't sure where to put this next section in the midsole or in the uppers, but I'll just kind of talk about it in between them. If you look at the back of the Shadow 5, you can see this little plastic heel counter that I've torn through now. This is actually not attached to anything. So on some shoes, this actually is going to add some, some stability or rigid support in the heel. This is not going to do much for torsion. This is just more a way to get that rubber to come up a little bit higher on the shoe and to create this platform of foam in the back. Now, underneath of this, though, is a truss system that goes all the way from the medial heel all the way around the lateral side, which does give some excellent containment. So even though the heel counter isn't really doing much on the external side, what's underneath of it really is. So you still are getting a lot of torsional support. And because the lace line goes so high and you're really enveloped by all of this padding in the heel, the lockdown on these is tremendous. Heel slippage is just about zero on these. Now, that being said, going into the midsole, as you can see on the exterior side, you do have a tread bridge a la the Jordan 35s and 36s. This one, you get an entire bed of Cloud Foam Plus on top of it, and then a top-loaded shank, which actually looks pretty small. However, it is a butterfly shank, so on both sides of it, it does extend out a little bit. Not too much, but enough. However, because of that bottom-loaded tread bridge, which really keeps the shoe really darn stable, and it acts almost as a springboard, so whenever you're loading the shoe, this tread bridge is then loading the rear foot and vice versa. It's just like the Jordan 35 and 36. It makes the shoe work as kind of one big diving board when you are loading energy through it. And so that's why the Jordan 35s and 36s feel like they're so bouncy. Same with the Shadow 5, because it just acts as a springboard. It's just a really efficient system. The boom foam in this comes in the removable insole. I actually thought this was a drop-in at first when I felt it on foot, and I thought, this didn't look like a drop-in. They didn't say it was a drop-in, but it is just a little bit of a thicker insole. It is not a drop-in. You can take this out. The one thing is, the Cloud Foam Plus, as you can see, it is gridded in the back on the heel to make it a little bit more forgiving on the heel, which just gives it makes the foam feel more comfortable without you having to actually sacrifice anything in the foam. Thing is what you actually feel is the boom foam, and it is pretty comfortable. However, because it is so textured, it does hold on to heat a little bit. It also holds on to your socks. It is very hard to get into this shoe with this insole and have your socks not bunch up. I tried pulling them really tight, everything. It just really wants to hold on to them. You can just maybe burr this down like I do on the durability test, and that will stop it just because that texture, or just replace with something else if that's something you're concerned about. If you don't care about that, or if you don't mind pulling up your socks here and there, it's fine, but just get ready for a little bit of a difficult entry into the shoe with your socks if you keep this as is. Now, if you look at this setup on the bounce height test, it only got 27 centimeters in the forefoot and then 32 in the heel, which isn't like super elite. Cloud Foam Plus is a little bit more of a dense foam. It reminds me of some of the really dense Phylon in a lot of Nike tennis shoes. The thing is with how efficient the shoe loads energy, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. I actually think it's not a bad setup because it almost gives the shoe a little bit more stability for what it's doing and for what the tread bridge and the shank is doing. So the foam in this setup is almost keep the rest of the shoe stable while these two shanks do their job. But if you're looking for that real bouncy feeling, like the Way of Wade All City 11, the Way of Wade 10, you know, even the Fission 8, it definitely has a little more of a grounded feeling to it. But like I said, not necessarily a bad thing. It just kind of depends on the feeling you want underfoot. And getting into the outsole tread, this is a really unique design. This is basically just a linear pattern going through the midfoot of the shoe. Then you have gridding in the forefoot as well as in the heel. And you have a little bit of like a grip pad here underneath your big toe, which I really like. The durometer on these is very high at 21.5. So this is very hard rubber. This is meant more for an outdoor court. And I just started doing this test with a 30-degree ramp of reclaimed hardwood from an old high school basketball court. And like I said, I found that 30 degrees is kind of the tipping point to where, you know, shoes will grip versus not. And it kind of shows you the elite shoes versus the non-elite shoes without having to, you know, weigh them down more to get them to slide or get them to stop. You can either increase the weight of the shoe or increase the slope, and that's what I chose the 30-degree slope. If you look at these, when you put them linear on the slope, they just slide right down. However, when you turn it sideways, much different story. They grip a lot better, and it's because the lines are now perpendicular to the slope. And so that being said, going side to side, especially on painted, slick outdoor courts or even indoor hardwood, these grip very, very well. It's just going like stopping front to back on hardwood isn't going to be as isn't going to be as grabby. It's going to be a little more forgiving. These are, you know, like I said, these are billed as you know, more outdoor shoes. I found really on both surfaces, they did pretty well going side to side. Like I said, on indoor hardwood, if you are going front to back, they are going to be a little bit more forgiving. On outdoor courts, I didn't really find that. I found, you know, axial motion as well as side to side motion was fine. So if you look at these on the speed ratio though, they do come in at a 1.91, which I think is a little misleading on the shoe because, like I said, the foam is just not set up to be super explosive. It's the tread bridge and the shank that is meant to give the shoe its kind of pop and explosion. So the shoe does feel a little bit more dense underfoot, right? It's a little bit more of a muted feeling than some of the other Way of Wade shoes, just directly underfoot. But once you start actually, you know, putting energy into the shoe, that's when it starts giving it back. I do wish I had a test that could better show the shanks of the shoe, because I think some of them, you know, some shoes, you know, that they get kind of misrepresented in that test. But remember, the more you put into this shoe, the more you put into the shank, the more you're going to get back out of it. And speaking of that, if you look at the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, not a millimeter of damage on this. And the interesting thing is these tread lines are so narrow, right? You know, there's not a lot of tread protecting it from the burr. So not even a millimeter of damage. I think on outdoor courts, you know, these are going to be just fine in terms of durability. Like I said, surprisingly on indoor hardwood too, at least for me, they did just fine as well. And getting into the fit of the Shadow 5s, these definitely felt a little bit more medium to me than some other Way of Wade shoes. If you're a narrow or medium foot, I can just go true to size. A 2E, I would be going up a half size on these. In a 4E, honestly, I think try to go up a half size, but if not, I think maybe just go with like the Way of Wade 10 or something, or the Fission 8, just something a little bit more forgiving on your foot. These are definitely a little bit more streamlined for you. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, you know, with the boom foam insole in there, they do feel decently forgiving. if it were me, I'd be putting an orthotic in these for really any type of plantar, you know, bottom of the foot type pain. The rest of the shoe contains very well and it holds an orthotic exceptionally well. Just that Cloud Foam Plus, it's like I said, it feels pretty dense underfoot. So, like I said, I think in terms of throwing orthotics in these, they work great with orthotics, they work great with braces, so I think that's fine. But I think augmenting these probably is the way to go. And in terms of the playability, I tested these on the outdoor courts and it was a really cold and windy day. So the conditions weren't awesome. And this shoe really kind of cut through that pretty well. I noticed, you know, in terms of just trying to, you know, run through the wind, I guess you could say, like, you know, trying to cut through the hoop, even in pretty gusty conditions. I feel like these were a really nice, sturdy base. I could lift up off the ground okay. I mean, I guess okay for me, I should say. And in terms of the side-to-side stability on these, they were really nice, especially with this giant piece of plastic here on the outside of the shoe. So, like I said, they don't feel as, like I said, bouncy and just kind of resilient. However, once you start running in them and once you start putting energy into them, that's when you really get the benefits to these. So I think if you're somebody with stronger legs or someone that has, you know, a really strong hamstring Achilles group, can really get that nice pop up off the ground because of the shanks. And, you know, like I said, for an outdoor shoe, if you're a power forward, larger guard, even a center, I think can really find a friend in these. I think if you have a little bit more of a stout orthotic in these also, I think that really kicks these up a notch. I think that orthotic also, it might just kind of interact with the tread bridge, with the shank very well. So, like I said, they're not they're not speedy like the Son of Flash, and they don't have that bouncy feeling like the Fission 8, but they definitely are stable, and they definitely kind of do a lot of the same things as those shoes, but just almost in different ways. It's a unique feeling underfoot. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on these, especially with the Shadow 5 series. I know that these appeal to kind of a different person than the Way of Wade 10 or the All City 11 does. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you do want to see one of the older siblings to the Shadow 5, the Way of Wade All City 11 V2 go under the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you some Wednesday.